Good evening. Welcome to the second installment of Shiloh's Black History classes. I'm Fred Jeff Smith, pastor of Shiloh, and I'm very happy that you chose to come and share with us this evening. Whether you're here with us in person or sharing with us virtually via live stream, we welcome you to this second session. May we bow our heads, please, in a word of prayer. Lord God, we thank you again that your divine providence has enabled us to assemble ourselves together, and we thank you for the purpose of our coming, that we might learn, that we might exchange thoughts and ideas, that we might grow as a result of our being here. We ask your blessings upon all that is said and done, that it would be beneficial to us and that it would be beneficial to your kingdom. We lift up our brothers and sisters, those names that appear on the screens. We ask, your God, that you would intercede as only you can, stand with them, by them, and for them, where they have not the strength to stand for themselves. Let us now spend this time in the wisest manner possible. In the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Again, we're grateful for your being here tonight. Dr. Samuels has graciously agreed to present to us again this evening, and the topic has to do with the black conservative and how it impacts our contemporary times. And so Dr. Samuels, for those who don't know, is the chair of the Political Science Department of Southern University and a member here of Shiloh. This is his third year coming to share with us, and we're grateful for his presence. And I'm going to get out of his way. Dr. Samuels, please come.
Thank you so much, and good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thankful to be here. Thankful to see so many of you here, that you took your time to be here tonight. We also want to do a shout out to those people who are joining us virtually. Your presence is appreciated as well. I think tonight I'll be presenting on black conservatives, legitimate believers, or Uncle Toms. The next 2 weeks, we will be led by the Reverend Dr. Errol Domain, the pastor of the Elm Grove Baptist Church. He will conduct the last 2 sessions of this series, and I'm looking forward to him sharing with us. Before we begin, let's bow in prayer. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, God who has brought us this far by faith, we thank you so much for allowing us to be present this evening, for bringing us here, and for us to have this opportunity to share and to reflect upon our history, and God but also to understand how you have been with us through all these times, and how you will continue to be with us. Father, I pray that in the proceedings tonight that I will decrease so that you may increase, so that your word may accomplish the goal that you set out for it. I pray for our time tonight, and I pray, God, that as we leave here, that you would take control of every mode of transportation that brought people here, and allow us to get to our places of abode safely, be with us this week. And I pray, God, that this Black History Month, Lord, that you will bless us in mighty ways, and show us how we can be more useful in your kingdom. It's through Jesus that we pray. Amen. Okay. Last week, in our session, we basically said that the carnage that Trump 2.0 has wreaked upon the United States and the world is something that could have been easily foreseen. Yet, despite that, there are many people who nevertheless insist that I didn't vote for this, or I didn't think it would be this bad. However, we also said that centuries of oppression against African Americans should have been a cautionary tale for what was possible if Trump was given a second bite at the apple. And because that history of oppression against Black Americans has really provided the laboratory for authoritarianism in this country. So what we're seeing is not new. It's what the country has always done to Black folks. And so white folk in America are waking up to tyranny now that it's affecting them. As long as it was affecting somebody else, they made excuses. However, we also ended with the idea that in spite of all this, God is reminding us that we can trust Him in the midst of the chaos. So that's where we left it last time. Talking about the chaos and that God is with us. But we must be clear that there are some people who are actually welcoming this moment. And some of those people look like us. Okay? In fact, many Black conservatives, they're not just spectators in the MAGA crowd. Some of them are actually leading the band. They're leading the charge. They welcome this moment. You know, Clarence Thomas welcomes this moment. Larry Elder welcomes this moment. Candace Owens welcomes this moment. Byron Donalds welcomes this moment. And others, they seem to actually relish bucking against the mainstream of Black opinion. And of course, some Black folk, majority of Black folks in many ways, have choice words for some of these people. We call them traitors. And those are the kind words that we can say in the confines of this assembly. But one of the questions I want to ask is this fair? Is this fair? Is it fair to simply just dismiss these people as just traitors, Uncle Toms, whatever, or are they legitimate believers, or are they Uncle Toms? And so that's the question that we want to address tonight as we think about Black conservatives. Are they legitimate believers or Uncle Toms? And now as we proceed tonight, I want to start off by saying that in many ways this is a sensitive topic. Okay, this topic hits home for many of us. Politics has divided many families. Recently, I just saw a report just today it's probably a year or so old, about this father who shot and killed his daughter because, and he was alcoholic, so I mean, he probably had some other issues too, but because they were arguing over President Trump. And that's carrying it too far. Okay? But we live in a world where politics increasingly it's dividing families. It's friends or neighbors, coworkers, people who will say, "I didn't know you thought like that," and so it's created situations where a lot of conversations are uncomfortable, awkward, maybe at the holiday dinner, let's not talk about this. Let's talk about some other things, So some people feel estranged from one another in this environment, increasingly, and so when we talk about this, I want us to. We're not here just to unfairly just demean people we disagree with, or we're not trying to demonize people, especially people who we care about, people we love, who may have some views that I don't understand why you think like that, or I thought I knew you better than that. So we're not trying to demean people in this. But our goal is to understand what is happening right now in the world around us, and so that's what we're trying to do tonight. So that's the caveat that we have before we begin. So let's, after we laying that foundation, we're going to proceed. I want to ask you, when you think of an Uncle Tom, what comes to mind? Clarence Thomas. Okay. Okay. The Oreo cookie. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can somewhat agree with that. If you actually read the book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, but right. But anybody else? When you think of Uncle Tom, what comes to mind? Judas. Judas Iscariot. And he's somebody who will sell out his community for $1 or less. Or okay. Okay. Okay, these are some of the things I kind of thought of here. When we're thinking about Uncle Tom, and we define what we mean by Uncle Tom's. Obviously, this is, like I said, this is derived from Uncle Tom's Cabin. Whether it's taken out of context or not, that's where it comes from the character from that novel. But people are considered to be traitors to the black race, those who would sell us out. In the same, we in the category with a Benedict Arnold, or Judas Iscariot, I mean, you can't imagine anyone saying, okay, oh, there's a new baby born. What's his name? Benedict Arnold. And you just don't. Nobody's going to do that because that name is associated with a traitor, somebody who betrayed, who betrayed the country. And so when we think about that's what we think about when we think about someone who's an Uncle Tom. But another way of thinking about what an Uncle Tom is that when a person is labeled as an Uncle Tom in the black community, And if you, first is accused of being that. And if the label sticks, it indicates to people that this is a person who has sold us out, so consequently, they no longer have to be taken seriously. We don't have to know what they believe. We don't have to inquire why they have sold us out. Their views are illegitimate. We don't have to take them seriously. They are dismissed. Okay? So I'm gonna come back to this idea a little bit later. But that's typically what we mean when we think about someone who's Uncle Tom. It's someone who who is believed, who is held to have betrayed the interests of black people. And consequently, we have no respect for them. We should no longer take them seriously. And so as we think about this in the context of black conservatism, I think we have to first of all address the idea that first of all, black people are not monolithic. We have never been monolithic. There has never been this time, somehow, there's never been this time when all black people thought alike, there was this time when we were all in unity and we were all walking in one place, but now we're so divided. That is a myth. That simply isn't true. It's not true. It has never been true. The mere fact that we have had a common experience of oppression, that by itself does not mean that we're just going to automatically come to a common view of what to do about it. That's just so unrealistic. The existential problem of black life in this country is that we are the only people who did not ask to come here. And so what black politics has ultimately been about is that now that we're here, what do we do about it? And from the very beginning, we have never been of one mind about how to deal with that. And that's just the way it is. And so this myth that somehow we all got to come together in order to make progress, actually, that's historically inaccurate. That's not what happened. We have often disagreed about the way to go forward, and sometimes we have tried to paper over our differences. Because we can't handle the idea that black people don't see things the same way. And so, we'll say things like, well, Du Bois and Washington, they had the same goal. They just want to go about it different ways. Or Martin and Malcolm had the same goals, but they just were going about it a different way. But that doesn't take seriously what Martin was saying. It doesn't take seriously Malcolm X's perspective. It doesn't take seriously that Du Bois and Washington had some different viewpoints. And it's true that it's possible that there were ways in which one could have complemented the other. But the fact of the matter is that they didn't see eye to eye. And that's just the reality. Now, fortunately, our progress has not required uniformity. There's this belief somehow that if we could all just get on the same page, if we all thought alike, and some of us are forever critiquing other black people because they don't see it like us, and we can all get on the same. But history teaches us that hasn't been necessary. Now that doesn't mean that all of our conflicts are productive. But the point of the matter is that we don't have to all agree. And in fact, sometimes our differences can actually be creative. Martin and Malcolm didn't agree. But Malcolm kind of told Martin secretly, no, it's probably a good idea that we're not seen too close. Because it's kind of good cop, bad cop. Because if they can't take Martin, the other alternative is Malcolm. So maybe it's a good idea that Malcolm guy is out there. Because so all of our differences are not unproductive in a way. But so my point is that we have not always agreed. And so in that point, black conservatism has always been with us. There have always been conservatives among us. There were conservatives among us during the antebellum period. When free black people in the North, there were conservatives after that, and they're conservatives now. So this is not new. Black people, so it's not necessary for us to act like we got to all think alike. So first of all, so black people are not monolithic, and basically conservatives have always been among us. Okay, so that's one thing we need to establish. Secondly, what I want to talk about is what do black conservatives basically believe? And some of this is oversimplification here, but some of this is kind of it has endured through various periods. Basically, black conservatives believe that African Americans must rely primarily on their own efforts, self-help, personal morality, and individual initiative, primarily to succeed in the United States. They believe that racism no longer poses a structural barrier to black progress. This is right. That racism no longer poses a structural barrier to black progress. So which basically implies that to the extent that some black Americans still fall behind, it's their fault. It's their failure to take advantage of the opportunities that exist. They also tend to believe that the demands of the civil rights movement have gone too far, that perhaps some of these ideas might be well-meaning, but they do more harm than good. So when some people in the civil rights community are pushing for affirmative action, or racial redistricting, certainly reparations, any of these kind of things, they argue that these proposals actually do more harm than good, that they foster a kind of dependency within the black community that undermines the values of hard work and self-help and individual initiative, that black people actually need in order to get ahead. And they also tend to have great respect for the values of Western civilization. Its institutions and its values, particularly, they tend to have a high regard for individualism and capitalism. All right. So these are some things that black conservatives typically believe. Now, some of the things they believe actually are not restricted to black conservatives. You know, there are some similarities between some of the values that black conservatives hold and what some blacks who are not conservatives hold. You know, for example, belief in things like in the value of self-help and individual initiative and entrepreneurship. These are not values that conservatives have a monopoly on. Black people have always believed in self-help. You don't have to be a conservative, you know, to believe in self-help. And so sometimes you'll hear black conservatives talking about these values as if they somehow invented them. And the only one who thought of that. Black people have always believed in self-help. Black people have always believed in entrepreneurship. Black people have always believed in doing what we can to help ourselves. And there are many black people who are not conservatives who also believe that there are some black people who aren't doing enough to help themselves. That there are some black people who are their own worst enemy. Okay? But you don't have to be a black conservative to believe that. You know what? So some of these values that I mentioned, like that conservatives believe, like self-help, these are not values that are just unique to conservatives. So there's some commonality here, among us, where we part company, or where they tend to part company with really the mainstream of black opinion here, is on the question of the degree to which racism continues to pose a substantial barrier to black progress. Okay, this is one of the fundamental divides that separates black conservatives from the mainstream of black opinion. Black conservatives tend to downplay, diminish racism or ignore it entirely as a structural barrier to black progress. Whereas many other African Americans, who believe in self-help, who believe in hard work, and who believe in all these other things, yet they also believe that racism is still real, and that there's still a barrier, and that is to black progress, and that there's still some structural barriers. And so, but the black conservative does not accept that. And so this is one of the fundamental differences between black conservatives and mainstream black opinion. And a second major difference between black conservatives versus sort of the mainstream of black opinion is that in black political culture, there's an expectation that both not only among our leaders, but also as individuals, that we should be working for the good of the quote-unquote black community. That's the expectation of that. Now sometimes we may disagree on what that means, but there's some kind of, and how to go about it, but there's this expectation that your advocacy should be aimed at that. So you're not just pushing your own interests of your group, but the idea that you have a responsibility to the black community. Black conservatives tend to reject that idea. They tend to be a lot more individualistic in their thinking. In fact, oftentimes they're at odds with what many people believe is in the interest of the black community sometimes, even though they may not think they are. But within the black community, there's this expectation of that somehow your views need to also align with some notion of what's in the interest of the black community. Now this is something that distinguishes black political culture from the dominant white American culture, whereas white politicians don't have that expectation. That's not expected of white politicians or white leaders. But oftentimes black leaders and black politicians are oftentimes judged by not just the extent to which they also help themselves. Are you pushing things that help the black community? but largely black conservatives oftentimes reject that notion that this is their responsibility. And so these are some basic definitions of what black conservatives mean. What black conservatives believe, and some of the ways in which they are similar to and different from other blacks who may not necessarily share their views. Any questions, thoughts, reactions before I move forward? If not, we'll keep. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Okay. All right.
Another thing I see that causes some serious schism is that in the white conservative slate, the section that says racism no longer poses a structural barrier to black progress, if there are blacks who believe that, I think they're out of their mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that. Getting closer to that. Now, what I also like to say too is that the black church itself is also a source of some black conservative thought. First of all, and just in general, black Christianities, in this country, they're our theological center of gravity. We're more theologically, typically more theologically conservative than American Christianity as a whole. Now, this is the generalization. We're not. The point here is not that all black Christians think alike, or all black congregations think alike, or all black denominations think alike. But the point here is that just in general, black Christianity theologically tends to be more conservative than American Christianity as a whole. That's the first point here. Secondly, the black church itself is much more central to black culture than, say, the white church is in white American culture. I think we could. That's a generalization I think that we can make. Again, the point here is not that that's not changing in some ways, but the point is that typically the black church typically has more weight, cultural weight, influence in black culture, generally speaking, than the white church has in white American culture in some ways. And so in part because of that, there are many many black folk hold conservative views on social and cultural issues. Even typically black Democrats typically are more conservative on social and cultural issues than Democrats as a whole. So that's not surprising. Black voters, for example, were always less approving of things like abortion or same-sex marriage, than, say, Democrats as a whole. So sometimes because black people are more socially conservative, at times the GOP has attempted, sometimes more successfully, sometimes more half-heartedly, at least to try to appeal or try to peel off some black conservatives who have social values to vote for them. And sometimes that's actually worked. For example, in 2004, when George W. Bush was running for re-election. At the time, 2004, same-sex marriage was not popular. There were actually a number of states that put ballot measures on the ballot to define traditional marriage as the union of one man and one woman. And Republicans specifically targeted certain states that were in particularly swing states. And in some cases, they appealed to some black pastors in some of states, you know, on this issue of same-sex marriage. And they had some success, you know, in moving the needle. Just, you know, and again, in a close race, you don't have to move that many people. So while, you know, while in general most Democrats still voted for John Kerry, in a number of key battleground states like Ohio, that decided the election, you know, in that state, they peeled off more blacks than they normally did, and in a close race, that's all you need to do. So my point is that, yeah, you know, so the GOP has at times, though not consistently, has attempted to say, well, since black people are conservative, maybe there's an opportunity. They're conservative, maybe we can opportunity to kind of appeal to the black voters. You know, so in some ways, because theologically black people are more conservative, in fact, theologically, a lot of times we have a lot in common with white evangelicals on a lot of things. You know, that would seem to be a potential opportunity for unity, but it hasn't, because ultimately the gulf between black and white Christians too often has come down to race. Martin Luther King said in 1957 that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America. That is still true in 2026. Black people, and particularly black Christians, still view racism as America's most fundamental moral issue. Now, white Christians basically don't believe that. You know, they think abortion is the most moral issue, or maybe it's homosexuality, or any number of cultural ills, you know, or maybe it's Bad Bunny, you know, but it's not, or something like that. But you know, so that oftentimes put black people in a conundrum, because sometimes black folk, there are black people who have genuinely socially conservative views on things, but they're now you're being asked to choose on one hand between one party that is socially liberal, that may embrace some things that you don't agree with biblically. You may not be down with all of this, you know, with transgender rights. You know, you may not be down with abortion and some other causes that may be socially liberal, but they are better on issues of racial justice on one end. And then you have another party that may be closer to your views on those issues, but they're racist. Or they don't, or at the very least, they don't care, which is almost just as bad. They don't think it's important. And so black people oftentimes are caught between this, and sometimes black people have to make choices, you know, between those. And so this is where a lot of black people are, you know, when it comes to choosing parties. And of course, some black conservatives, you know, because, you know, they end up going the religious right way. But the point is that this is in part the dilemma that sometimes that America puts black folk in. You know, is that, and sometimes it does feel to some people like it's a lesser of two evils. You know, I may not agree with them on this, but I just can't handle the Republican Party. Some people say I can't handle the Republican Party and what their view about race is, because to them that's the most important issue. But for people who may not think that's the most important issue, you know, they may be more amenable to the appeals of the religious right. So So this is the conundrum in many ways that this country puts us in. We said that black conservatism has been around for a long time, and so so it's a legitimate tradition in that ways, but it but it can become toxic. Okay, so I want to talk about somebody. This is when black conservatism becomes toxic. These are some things we want to think about. We think,
was reflected in the last race between Trump and Harris. Depending on whose statistics you look at, Trump pulled 21% of the vote. Or the black vote. The evidence is there that it's a conundrum, that we don't see things alike. The old saying, skin folk ain't necessarily kin folk.
right, yeah, right, and that's a very important point there, and we'll probably come back to that before we're done. But so black conservatism is a legitimate tradition within us. We've talked about to some degree that our system creates a conundrum for black folk, but there is a point in which black conservatism can become toxic. And here's some things to think about. Black conservatism can become toxic when, for example, it is rooted in a resentment of black people, a resentment of or alienation from black people. A black conservatism that is in denial about the significance of racism. That's when it can become toxic. A black conservatism that is more interested in identifying with white people than advocating for the best interests of black people. A conservatism that is rooted in a sense of moral superiority. I'm better than the rest of y'all. That can cause a problem. Black conservatism that is motivated by opportunism and riddled with hypocrisy. There is always a market in America for the black person who's willing to sell his people out. There is always a market in America for the black person who is willing to criticize other black people in front of white folks. White folk eat that up. It's like entertainment for them. So the person who is willing to do that will be handsomely compensated for doing that. There's always a market for the opportunists, for the grifters, who prostitute themselves in this form of fashion. So the one that's that real, and oftentimes, and some of these things, a lot of times the same people who do this are hypocrites. They are just, many of them have benefited from the very programs that they criticize. So a black conservatism that is rooted in opportunism and riddled with hypocrisy. And black conservatism that actively works against the interests of black people. So these are some things we want to think about when we want to think. It's one thing for people to hold certain views, but there's a point where it becomes toxic and become problematic for us. And these are some things you want to think about when we think about when does black conservatism become toxic. So let's just pull out an example out of the hat. Clarence Thomas, your friend. Yeah, that's your buddy. You know, here's a person who checks all the boxes of toxic black conservatism. Thomas's conservatism, it seems like it's rooted in a resentment of black people. One thing I would recommend to you, Frontline did a documentary a couple of years ago. Actually, it focused on not only on Clarence Thomas, but also Jenny Thomas, actually. And talk about their background, and it is very illuminating. Here's a person who never felt he never fit in. You know, he was teased because he was too black. Other black he didn't have he didn't have a good relationship with his father. His grandfather, wasn't exactly the greatest of persons. So he got a lot of baggage. And when he didn't get the job that he thought he should have gotten coming out of law school, he blamed it on the fact that he blamed on the fact that he got in on affirmative action. And instead of blaming white folks for being racist, he blamed it on the fact that he was labeled, so he's carried this resentment, with him, with them. He also has a perverse need to be validated by white folk. When he was, for example, going up the ranks of the Republican Party, he was working in the Reagan administration with the EEOC, and he would be the one to tell the racist joke. Like he wanted to be included. He wanted included. See, I'm one of y'all. Again, he benefited from affirmative action. He would not have gotten into the law school he got into without affirmative action. And yet, he was leading the charge to end it. When the Supreme Court rolled back and declared race in college admissions a couple of years ago unconstitutional, and then he writes this long, inaccurate, ahistorical opinion about the colorblind origins of the 14th Amendment, which is absolutely insane. The 14th Amendment came about because of the black codes in the South that Southern states enacted to basically say, you are no longer slaves, but you are still niggas. And the Civil Rights Act was passed to get rid of those, but because they were concerned that a future Congress could repeal it, they tried to protect that in the Constitution. There's no colorblind origin of the 14th Amendment. That's nonsense. But here's a guy who has zealously works against the interests of black people. And that's on the court. There was a case out of Texas. That was a case one time in Texas where even the conservatives on the court said that, well, in this case, the court went too far. They had given this black defendant who was on death row. He had gotten he had clear due process violations. It was so bad that all the court, even all the conservatives on the court, said Texas was wrong. Everybody except Clarence Thomas. And he wrote a long dissent about how it was wrong, and the person should be executed. But this is who he is. And he wants to be the one who writes the opinion to destroy the Voting Rights Act. So that's who he is. He is the most corrupt Supreme Court justice in the history of this country. With his sugar daddy that he's been taking millions of dollars in gifts from. But because he has made it clear that he is not interested in pursuing the interests of black people, he is basically allowed to live as a virtual white man who can act with impunity. So he takes, so you got people like that. And then there's some people, there are colored folk who just downright coons. They just downright coons. You know what? This idea, there is the stereotype of the black buffoon who helps perpetuate the myth of white supremacy, white superiority. If you're willing to play that role, you will be compensated well. And then if you're willing to use that as a vehicle to attack other black people, so much the better. So you got people like Ben Carson, who nobody would have ever taken him seriously as a presidential candidate had he not gone to CPAC in 2013 to say Obamacare is the worst thing since slavery. And white folks were just giving him all kind of praise, giving him money, while he was pretending to run for president. He wasn't running for president, actually. He was engaged in a book tour disguised as a presidential campaign. Tim Scott, do you have any self-respect? You know, the cartoonish way in which he endorsed Donald Trump. You know, I just love you, Donald Trump. And my man, Stephen A. Smith. Runs this Sean Hannity, trying to pretend that he's ashamed he voted for Kamala Harris. He always doesn't miss the opportunity to attack black women. And never, Joy Reid said, you know the reason that you're making all this money is because you want to attack black women. That's why they pay you all that kind of money to act a fool. Because you're not a threat. So how do we deal with black conservatives? Here's a couple, just real quickly. Black conservatism is a legitimate tradition. We got to recognize that, within the black community. We need to resist the temptation to lump all black conservatives in one category. Okay, we can look at what's happening on TV and everything else, but I understand everybody isn't just like that. We have to resist the temptation to put everybody in one category. Know what conservatives believe. Take their beliefs seriously. One of the things that calling people Uncle Toms does sometimes is that it teaches us that we don't have to take their views seriously. We don't have to debate their ideas. But that emboldens them. They say, well, they just don't like me because I don't agree with them. Take them, understand what they believe. Take their beliefs seriously. If you don't agree with them, know why you don't agree with them. And respect everyone, no matter whether we agree with them or not. Now, the scriptures give us some clues to how we should treat people, especially people we don't agree with sometimes. We need to remember that we're all sinners. We're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God. All of us need grace. All of us get some things wrong sometimes. We little, you know what I'm talking. We should lovingly deal with those with whom we do not agree. That's not easy sometimes, especially for big mouth people like me who got a lot of opinions. You know, 1 Corinthians 8 talks about we all have knowledge, but knowledge puffs up. Love builds up. Love is patient and is kind, and it does not envy. You know, it doesn't keep record of wrong. It does not rejoice in evil, but it loves the truth. The truth. Now, we should all be prepared to give an answer for the faith which we hold. We must do this with gentleness and respect. Love your enemies. That ain't easy too, right? You know, that's proof that the Bible came from God. Love your enemies. Pray for those who curse you. You know, don't take revenge, but leave room for the Lord's anger. You know what? Love the truth. Love the truth. Don't be so convinced that we're right that we can't accept the truth when we're confronted with it. Love the truth. Thessalonians has a warning about what happens to people who fail to love the truth. They will have a powerful delusion because they fail to love the truth. Love the truth. Accept correction as discipline because God is treating us like sons. And ultimately, it's God who changes people. A lot of times, sometimes we think that we can do the changing. But it's God that changes people. You know, no one can come to the Lord unless the Holy Spirit enables them. We forget that. We want to change them. We want to be the one to do it. No, God's the one who changes people. God's the one that changes people. So that's all I got tonight. It has been, we got about 2.5 minutes, I guess. Anybody got any quick questions left? But I appreciate this opportunity to share with you in Black History Month. I'm definitely looking forward to listen to Reverend Domain's presentation in the next 2 weeks. Does anybody have any other question or comment before we close it out tonight? If not, I actually ended 2 minutes early.
I am very appreciative to Dr. Albert Samuels for taking the time to share with us. This is the 3rd year that he has shared with us, and each time it has been compelling and challenging, and we are grateful for that. As Dr. Samuels said, on next Wednesday and the final Wednesday of February, I've invited Dr. Errol K. Domain to come and share with us about an issue with regard to Black theology. I wanted him to talk about liberation theology and how it affects the Black church. Just as Dr. Samuels said about Black people are not monolithic, our theology is not monolithic. Not everybody is a liberation theologian. Some are more strict fundamentalists, and they believe a certain kind of way. And I thought it would be beneficial because liberation theology speaks to the social justice issues that have typified and defined Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. This church has built its entire ministry around holistic ministry and meeting the needs of people, and that is the basis of liberation theology. And so Dr. Domain will be expounding upon that over the next 2 weeks. Thank you all so much for coming. We hope that you'll be back again next week. May we stand together, please. Repeat after me, please. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and give you peace. Amen. Please come by and thank Dr. Samuels for his presentation.